Okay, I think the recording is now underway.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, pastoral transitions on the side of the pastor who is searching for a new call. The work that I'm doing focuses really in several areas. First, working with what I would call pastors in discernment. What that looks like is that a pastor may call or reach out or email saying, you know, I'm thinking of circulating my profile, or I have an eye on a particular opportunity, or maybe I'd just like to chat because I haven't done a profile in a long time and I don't know if God is really calling me to something new, but I need to explore that. And so I have a limited number, but I do have a number of hours in my week available to sit with pastors and help them work through those discernment questions, including some hours available to take a quick glance at someone's profile. If a person needs more substantial help with a profile, they need to seek that elsewhere. But if they want it reviewed, particularly as they're transitioning into our new profile format, or they just haven't written a profile in a while, I'm certainly willing to do that and make any comments as necessary. Then comes the step when they actually submit their profile for validation, when I will validate a person's profile, which involves some checks of our UCC data hub and some employment verification, things like that, and then put those profiles into circulation at the request of the requesting pastor. Ultimately, I will be intersecting with our members in discernment when they are approved pending call, typically after their ecclesiastical councils. They are then able to circulate profiles, and I stand ready to assist MIDS with that profile. Construction can give some advice about that and get those profiles validated and into circulation as well. I receive several requests per week from pastors all over the country asking us to direct their profiles to an opening within our Illinois conference, both for interim and settled searches, really mainly more for settled searches. And I'm always happy to do that and want to be clear that the ethics of our search and call process in the United Church of Christ mean that anytime a pastor receives a request for a profile circulation, as long as we can verify the fitness, or as long as we perform it and what we would call an executive judicatory check with another association or another conference, if everything is on the up and up, it is our ethical obligation to share that profile with the place the person is asking us to direct it. I'm also doing some work with pastors who are departing their congregations, maybe for another congregation, and with pastors who are in the process of retiring from their congregations. And one of the resources that we have from the national setting of the UCC that we use in that transition process is a document called A Sure Foundation. It can be downloaded from ucc.org. If you search for Search and Call, you'll find it. It's a PDF, and it's an excellent resource for congregations and for pastors, for governing boards in understanding the ethics that we have in place as UCC clergy around our departure from a congregation and our making way for a new pastor, whether an interim and then eventually a settled pastor, to come and meet and come alongside that congregation, which necessarily means our retraction and our ability to maintain some distance from that congregation. So I resource those documents and work with those pastors as needed. An area of crossover to committees on ministry, which committees on ministry, all of our what we call our authorization and standing function, is now Reverend Law's portfolio. But there is likely some crossover that will be happening, because whenever a pastor leaves a congregation, we strongly encourage that that pastor and that governing board have an exit interview. And I know it varies a little from association to association what the practices in all 5 of our associations have been around those exit interviews, but often that is a place where the committee on ministry intersects with the local church and the departing pastor. And so that can be a place where there is some handoff or some sharing of responsibility with Reverend Laws. I will be the primary person traveling out to local churches to conduct liturgies of release and farewell when a pastor is leaving. We have a beautiful liturgy in the UCC Book of Worship, which really helps name those transitory moments for a congregation. There's a liturgy of mutual confession and reconciliation, and a naming that the pastor is being released from their pastoral vows by that particular congregation. And, you know, obviously as celebrants, many of us are celebrants of ritual and liturgical moments. Those types of celebrations are very meaningful and very important as a church says goodbye and makes its way through that season of pastoral transition. And sometimes the calendar is such that Reverend Laws, Reverend Murph, and I, or even Reverend Carlson to a certain extent, have to share responsibility for where we are with those different liturgies on any given Sunday. The same is true for liturgies of installation. For instance, Reverend Laws was just with Pastor Sheridan in Rockford this past weekend. I'll be in Chicago at Ravenswood UCC in a couple of weeks for the service of farewell for Reverend Coulter. We'll be planning his installation in CMA later in the spring, and so on and so forth. On the congregational side of what we call pastoral transitions, my role intersects with search teams, both teams that are searching for an interim pastor and teams that are searching for settled pastors. So that involves circulating profiles to those search teams, maintaining our ministry opportunities listing on the National UCC Opportunities Listing website. At times, it entails communicating with what we call our formula of agreement, denominational partners, judicatory ministers from the PCUSA, the ELCA, or the RCA, where sometimes we will have a candidate who has expressed interest in one of our congregations, just like we could express interest in one of their congregations. And there are some judicatory steps that we follow when those types of things take place. I will go out either in person or often by Zoom and meet with and orient an interim search team or a settled search team to their work, and then often check in with their search chair multiple points along the way, sometimes come back into intersecting with the full team as they get ready to negotiate a call or to set up a neutral pulpit. So when I'm tracking a search team, there are many times that I'm in touch with that search chair, and then other times that I'm in touch or in meetings with the whole team. And that work has been handed off to me over the past month and a half from Reverend Laws and Reverend Murph. So for the most part, all of those searches that are open or coming open are now in my inbox and in my workflow. And from time to time, we have conversations with churches about the possibility of sharing pastors, of creating a kind of shared parish, or of merging, or maybe even yoking a UCC church with a church of another denomination, particularly a formula of agreement denomination. And we have a couple of those conversations underway in a couple of locations within the Illinois Conference right now. And then eventually the portfolio for this role is to include resourcing churches who are contemplating church closure and who want to plan what we call their legacy in the United Church of Christ. And often that intersects with Reverend Carlson or with other members of the ministry leadership team as well. So the other things that go on in my work with pastoral transitions, as I already mentioned, I think there is a kind of executive check that goes on in some of our searches. I have received some training from the National UCC, which has been, everything our MESA office, our Ministry Excellence office in the national setting does is of utmost quality. And recently they offered a training on issues of bias in the search and call process, which we know are present. Sometimes a church can be open and affirming but there can still be questions of how ready that church is to live into that identity in the search and call process. We talked a lot in that training about DEI inventories and just readiness of congregations to think as broadly as possible about looking at a diverse pool of candidate profiles. And one of the things that we recommend and that I recommend in my own work with search teams is that a local church search committee can use a diversity inventory, which we have available through the United Church of Christ. I provide that to search teams. And that helps, they can do a kind of internal survey of themselves as a search team and as a congregation to try to gauge their awareness and really their readiness to engage the search and call process from a broader range of diversity than perhaps they have in the past. Over this coming summer, I will be forming a committee that will be tasked with updating our conference compensation guidelines. Some of you may know that those are current as of 2020, but we do need to refigure them. What we've been doing from year to year is just adding the national COLA increase percentage to the base salary, but the time has come for us again to analyze some market comparables across the state of Illinois, and obviously those are different depending on where you are within the Illinois conference, but we will be initiating that work over summer 2022, and my hope would be that we would have that work ready for new churches to use in 2023 at the turn of the year. We are working in our Illinois conference office on consolidating and updating our pulpit supply lists and our lists of interim ministers. So please know that that work is underway, and we are aware that people are awaiting those documents to be forthcoming from us. And then one of my other projects for this spring and summer is to be in contact with our deans at CTS or at particularly other UCC seminaries and Chicago area seminaries, so that we can begin to make contact and get the word out that we are glad to circulate profiles of promising, young talent within the Illinois Conference that might be forthcoming from our seminaries, particularly our own MIDs and other MIDs in the UCC process. So that's a project not yet launched, but is a project within the portfolio of my job description. Then turning to the question of pastoral care, I think that we are all aware on the ministry leadership team that how responsibility for our associations is handled is significantly different in this model that we're living into than it has been in the past. Certainly, when I was sitting in the local church as a pastor, this model would have been very different than the way I knew where to go and whom to ask about certain things in the old model. So in this model, we are dividing what we're calling pastoral care between ourselves, so that I have pastoral care responsibility to clergy and to a certain extent to churches in the Eastern Association and in the Fox Valley Association. And in the next slide, I'll talk about where there are other forms of care or resourcing which come from other people on the staff. But the way that I've been working on this so far is mainly through the association councils. And if you serve in either of these associations, you know that we haven't yet had a full-on launch of what this pastoral care will look like definitively. But on the Eastern Association side, I was privileged in the past couple of weeks to meet with one of the clusters active in the Eastern Association and then with the Association Council. And I will be at the association meeting April 30th, which is taking place in Champaign. And what we'll be doing in the Eastern Association is that when I am back in the office, I'm currently on vacation this week, and when Sarah Lorbach is back from her vacation this week, we will be collaborating and putting out a survey to all of the Eastern Association clergy with some questions about the kinds of pastoral nurture people are looking for, particularly as we emerge, a little bit from pandemic, understanding that the Nor'easter cluster used to have a retreat at Tower Hill and thinking that perhaps might want to become a whole association retreat. We'll be asking about whether people would like to be part of what formerly were called touch points, but might now be called circles of care. And I'll just be making some personal contacts with all of those clergy in the next month as well. And then part of this work of pastoral care is to be available for referral. And I'll say more about referral in the next slide. Over on the Fox Valley side, I had a long conversation last week with Reverend Brian Cope, who is the Fox Valley Association moderator. And he basically shared his goals for me for reconnecting clergy within the cluster. His, I think, sense was that there had not been a deep amount of connection in the past 2 years during the time of pandemic, and then with Reverend Wood's departure from the conference staff. So one of his primary goals for the association from the seat of the moderator is to reinitiate a good degree of mutual support and reconnection. So in furtherance of that goal, I'll be meeting with the association council on April 4th, just to get to know them and talk to them a little bit more about what that support and reconnection needs to look like. And then Reverend Cope and I intend that following that association council meeting in April, we'll have a forthcoming email to all the Fox Valley clergy, kind of with the same kind of survey, or raising a series of questions about what are the desires around clusters, around what used to be called the touch points that might be reconfigured into something else, or about other points of contact and nurture and support. I'll be reaching out, have already begun reaching out and setting up some lunches and some other things with Fox Valley clergy, but we'll continue to do that as spring unfolds. And then again, I'm assembling my own list of referrals, which I'll talk about in a moment, to have places to refer clergy who need even more support than we on the MLT are necessarily able to give, or than their colleagues are necessarily able to give. We know that these past 2 years have obviously been very difficult for clergy. I was one of them, I've lived through it. And so we know that the needs are great. So when I talk about referrals, I can also talk about what we're calling handoffs, or in the language of all of our job descriptions, what we hope will be fairly seamless transitions. And what those transitions on the MLT staff might look like is that I'm aware that in my work as a pastoral caregiver with 2 associations, there might be something that comes to my attention going on with a pastor or going on with the congregation, or likely both often, that is an appropriate situation for what we call some situational support, some moments when we on the MLT or Reverend Carlson might enter into conversation in perhaps a situation of conflict or grief to help to support a pastor and a local church. Unfortunately, we know that there are sometimes situations where questions of fitness are raised, and those questions are referred to Reverend Laws, who works with the fitness response team and with the committees on ministry, and she may be able to say more about that in the discussion time if people have more questions about that. On the kind of referral side, I am building a list of mental health referrals and spiritual direction referrals so that I can stand ready to make some referrals if we have clergy who contact me, confidentially in need of such referrals. And obviously, people often have many places from their own healthcare provider or from other resources in the community where they can find referrals such as those, but we want to stand ready to help people make those connections as well. And then where my work intersects, my work of pastoral care intersects with Reverend Murph's position is that we anticipate and hope that there will be some offerings from our, what we're calling our PI area, where we'll be putting pastors and congregations in communication about opportunities for wider conference training, formation, nurture opportunities, and just keeping the lines of communication open so that everyone knows of the rich array of programming that we have available through our national setting as well. You know, they have Thursdays for the Soul. They have an incredibly rich offering of virtual and webinar-based programs that intersect with all aspects of congregational life. But some of that programming right now intersects with supporting pastors as they emerge from pandemic, or supporting pastors who are seeing greater needs for mental health care within their own congregation, et cetera, et cetera. So part of my job is to kind of scan the horizon to see what programming is out there that we want to make sure that we communicate through our weekly newsletters or through our other communications in the conference, so that as many people, excuse me, as possible know about it and can make use of those resources. So let me stop talking. I've been speaking now for about 20 minutes, and I can keep this screen up. Maybe I'll do that at first if anyone has a particular question related to something that I've shared, and I can backtrack. Or I can just stop sharing. And you will just have to start speaking if you have a question, I think, because I can't see the whole gallery right now.
Yeah, I can't do it yet.
Okay, maybe I'll stop sharing. Okay, there's nothing in the chat. So
Stephanie, I'll kick it off.
Okay, fabulous.
Joy, perhaps expected or unexpected in the first several weeks.
A joy? Is that what you said?
Yeah, what has brought joy?
Well, partly just being in a new ministry setting has brought joy. I loved the ministry setting that I was in the local parish. But I was also ready for a new ministry setting. I think anyone who's been through a period of discernment and search and call probably understands that those moments arise in a pastor's life. And so it's very joyful to me that this opportunity arose in the midst of that discernment period. And Kathy, it's a joy to work with you. It's a joy to work with Terrell. It's a joy to work with Reverend Carlson and our phenomenal support staff, Lynn, Naomi, and Sarah. I feel joyful because, you know, like many of you, I've been in the Illinois conference for a long time. And this restructuring is not, you know, without many unknowns. It's not without some grief for how things were configured in the past, and particularly for some financial resources that enabled things to be configured differently, which simply are not our present reality. But all that being said, I feel like there's a deep level of help on the MLT at the moment. I feel like I've walked into very collegial, supportive relationships. Oh, and that brings me, Kathy, just let me go back and share my screen one more time, because I left off a slide that is pertinent to what we're saying right now. So this has to do with my joys. My joy is that I receive a lot of supervision, and I receive that supervision from Reverend Carlson, who makes herself available really for supervision and coaching to each of us on the MLT. The 3 ACMs have a weekly 3-hour staff meeting where we share our own devotions, our own concerns as pastoral leaders, our own personal prayers, our prayers for the churches and clergy of the conference. I interact with the support staff. I do not supervise any of the support staff, but certainly interact with them, and I'm in the office most Wednesdays, or that is at least my goal going forward, in the actual Westchester office. As Reverend Carlson mentioned, I think last week on the conference chat, each of us is responsible for forming our own pastoral relations committee, which can be a sounding board of confidentiality and support to each of us as ACMs. And so I'm in the process of doing that. I am accountable to the conference minister and to the personnel committee. And in my personal life, I see my own spiritual director regularly and participate in a community of practice with other ACMs from around the country, from around the United Church of Christ. So Kathy, maybe that is another partial answer to your question. Having been placed in a community of practice right away, the first week I was in this role really gave me a sense of groundedness in some collegiality with other ACMs. Yep. Okay. Let's see.
I think it's important for, oh, go ahead.
Somebody, yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's important to pick on Terrell for just a moment and to God that Terrell was raised with 4 sisters.
Right.
Very present mother in his life, so he can put up with.
Yeah.
It's a joy. You all are my sisters from another mother.
Oh,
all right, well, I'm looking for who else or comment to make.
Yeah, anyone else?
One of them talking about how our roles are overlapping in some ways as we more deeply involved in the new job descriptions, knowing those old ads for motor oil, there's engine run-on that we still have engagements and all. And I appreciate that we're really openly and easily.
I have a question for you, Stephanie. This is Molly.
Sure, Molly.
Your presentation is great, and it sounds like an absolutely overwhelming amount of stuff to do. How that was one of the concerns coming into some of these changes was how manageable is this role for an individual?
Right. I think that's a great question, and I don't know that I can answer that or should be responsible for answering that individually. I think that's a discernment that we'll all make as we evaluate this role, which is a transitional role. And so I know there will come a point where, we'll have some more formal check-in with the personnel committee and with Reverend Carlson about how this role is configured. It is a lot, that is honest, that is true. There are conferences that have an ACM only doing search and call, not doing search and call and pastoral care for 2 associations. So, I think it is true that this is a big portfolio. And the way we configured my entry into it is that we would launch it with search and call, and then we would add in the pastoral care. And so that's what we're in the midst of doing. And I can see that even with the search and call portfolio mostly already underway, that's almost a full week already, So the question of who gets attended to and what gets done in any given week, I think is an open one. But as I understand it, it's something that we'll keep evaluating, and we'll just have to keep seeing how it's going in this new configuration of the whole, overall work of the conference staff. But I'll also say that coming out of parish ministry, it feels manageable. Like, I'm not planning for Holy Week right now. I mean, there are certain things that it's a different pace. It's a different pace than parish ministry.
So are you sitting in on the COM for both Eastern and the Committee on Ministry for both Eastern and Fox Valley? No, you're not.
Okay. No, that is Kathy's role entirely.
Oh, that's Kathy. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Just trying to
So
figure.
the times
figure
that
things
I
out.
would intersect with a comm would be fairly infrequent. They would be if there unfortunately were a fitness issue to arise. If there were, some need to try to schedule an exit interview, depending on what association and how exit interviews are handled in an association, and in scheduling installations. So like associations do that differently. Some associations schedule their installations through their comm. Like right now I'm working with Kathy to get an installation scheduled in Fox Valley. So we have a little bit of overlap on that. But for the most part, and I don't know, Kathy, if you want to say more about that. And I think maybe that is probably the biggest question for people, because that's different than the old model, is who's staffing the comms and also who's staffing the councils. And Molly is staffing all the councils. So we know that that's different than the way it used to be. And I don't know if Kathy wants to say.
No, that's.
Okay, that's enough to say. And what that looks like in practice is if someone sends me something, I try to kindly reply very promptly and say, actually, this is a question for Reverend Laws, and she works with our authorization and oversight, and I'm forwarding this on to her, and make sure that we touch base to make sure that those things get handed off clearly.
The other thing I would just mention is I'm excited that you're going to take a look at the compensation guidelines. I would say like pulpit supply guidelines too, because it's really hard to find people.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Just a clarification.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Molly was going to have the primary responsibility for relating to the association councils.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you listed your meeting with the association councils.
I
So
did.
you're meeting them on a occasional kind of basis?
That's exactly right. I have met with them and will meet with them as by way of introduction. Reverend Laura Bach invited me to the Eastern Association Council meeting just so that I could meet everyone and they could meet me. That's what we'll be doing with Fox Valley on the 4th. And to the extent that I can attend the council meetings, I certainly will, but it will be in the pastoral care presence. It will not be in the governance presence, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Okay, maybe Reverend Carlson can say more about that if needed. So like, for instance, what that means is that the planning of an association meeting primarily does not involve me. That is either done by the association council itself or by some intersection with, I'll be present and happy to do whatever's needed of me, but won't be the primary driver of that planning. And we're aware, I think, that some of that, what has to now drive some of the work of the association councils is the councils themselves, that because we have fewer MLT members than we did in the past, that all of that, that we're living into a different way, that will be unfolded.
Stephanie, what are your normal days that you take off then?
I have been taking off Friday and Saturday, although, sometimes there are Saturdays where we have an association meeting or we have something else going on. So I think like everyone on the MLT, you might make up for that elsewhere in your week. But thus far, I've been able to protect at least most of Friday and Saturday fairly well. Not exclusively. Like last Saturday, we had conference council for a good deal of Saturday.
So which day would we expect to see you on the golf course?
Friday.
Good.
Or in the evening, or Sunday evening twilight golf, after an installation concluded, conceivably.
All right, thank you.
Or early in the morning on the range before I have to be in a meeting.
You like to golf that much then?
I really do. Yeah,
Good.
I played Division III college golf.
Oh, okay.
Although not well.
Noted. That's noted.
Being on the team and playing well is not the same thing.
Okay, so I'd rather play with Terrell than you then.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't played together yet, but we will find out.
We'll set something up, Terrell.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
sounds good. Anyone else with
Are
any?
there other comments, concerns?
You'll have to include me in that scramble, and I will make you all look really good.
Well,
I
I
just have-
had what's called a frozen shoulder, which happens for unknown reasons. And went through about a year of physical therapy last year to get my shoulder to move again. So this could be a whole new game. And probably not for the better. But we'll find out. Well, just maybe in closing, I'll just ask your prayers.
Dave Bateman. You're muted,
sorry?
Dave. Dave, you're muted.
Somebody's muted.
Dave, you're muted.
I was trying to get it off of mute.
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to welcome you, Stephanie. We're delighted to have you a part of this and the way that you're interacting with the associations and the whole thing. We are just delighted to have you here. So welcome. And
Thank
it's
you.
delightful to get a chance to visit with you today in this forum.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege. You know, I think I said it in the search committee interview. Just a moment, I've got to take down a phone number from the chat too here. That obviously, you know, I grew up in the UCC and I love the UCC. This is the only denomination I've ever been a part of. I know the UCC's promise and hope, and I also know many of the UCC's growing edges. But it's a privilege to serve. I was nurtured by people. This is the story I'll tell you. When I went to sit in front of the Church and Ministry Committee for the final committee meeting prior to my ecclesiastical council before my own ordination, there was a man, a lay person, serving on that Church and Ministry Committee in Nebraska, who was a member of the church in which I'd been baptized. And he had signed my baptismal certificate as the witness to my baptism. And, you know, 20 some years later, he was serving on the Church and Ministry Committee as a layperson, doing that incredibly important work of working with our members in discernment. Now, there were only 3 members in discernment in the whole Nebraska conference at that time, very different than the CMA or some of our other associations. But the faithfulness, you know, with which people do that work from generation to generation is not lost on me. And the faithfulness with which lay people are called into the work of our denomination in our covenant is not lost on me. So it's a privilege. It's a privilege to serve.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay,
Stephanie, thank you very, very much.
you are welcome.
I
You
can't
are
even,
welcome.
yeah, I can't even give a preview of next week. So if anybody knows and wants to throw that in, I'd appreciate it.
I think that next week is just the kind of all-purpose catch-up that comes at the end of the month.
Fourth
because it's
Wednesday.
the fourth
Yeah, we usually
Wednesday,
talk
and-
about, finances as well.
Yeah, and I believe that Reverend Carlson will be in charge of that. So,
Yep, that's all
Um,
right.
yep, okay. So I'm just going to put my email in the chat here in case you don't have it. If you're in Eastern or in Fox Valley, or you're on a search team, or you're a pastor who wants to talk about writing a profile or whatever, I am here. And there's my email, and happy to be in touch if I haven't been in touch with you already. It is a handoff process. Okay.
While you are doing that, oh, thank you for posting that.
Yeah.
I will close us with prayer
Thank you.
and look forward to seeing many, if not all of you next Wednesday. Let's pray. God, we're reminded about what a small world the United Church of Christ can be, and it reflects your larger world where connections and relationships and generations have stories to share and tell. We thank you for Stephanie sharing her, or at least part of hers, with us today. We thank you for the call you've placed on her. And we thank you, God, for each one gathered around the warm Zoom screen this afternoon to be together in community and in fellowship, to enjoy one another's company, and to be apprised of what's going on in this conference. So with grace, with thanksgiving, with hope, with deep love, God, we give you our thanks and praise. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good job, Stephanie.
You.
Good job.
Thanks, Reverend.
Very good job.
Blessings,
Very, very
everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.